Listen here to the words of our mothers, lessons and stories from days of old. Listen here to the words of our fathers, legends and stories from days of old.
Journeys Through Bookland, Volume 1. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. This is The Fairies by Willliam, Allingham. Up the airy mountain, down the dusky glen, we daren't go hunting for fear of little men. Wee folk, good folk, trooping all together, green jacket, red cap, and white owl's feather. Down along the rocky shore, some make their home. They live on crispy pancakes of yellow tide foam. Some in the reeds of the black mountain lake, with frogs for their watchdogs, all night awake. High on the hilltop the old king sits. He is now so old and gray, he's nigh lost his wits. With a bridge of white mist, Columkill he crosses, on his stately journeys, from Sleeve Lake to Ross's, or going up with music on cold stormy nights, to sup with the queen of the gay northern lights. They stole little Bridget for 7 years long. When she came down again, her friends were all gone. They took her lightly back between the night and morrow. They thought that she was fast asleep, but she was dead with sorrow. They have kept her ever since, deep within the lake, on a bed of flag leaves, watching till she wake. By the craggy hillside throw the mosses bare. They have planted thorn trees for pleasure here and there. Is any man so daring as dig them up in spite, he shall find their sharpest thorns in his bed at night. Up the airy mountain, down the dusky glen, we daren't go a-hunting for fear of little men. Wee folk, good folk, trooping all together, green jacket, red cap, and white owl's feather. A long time ago, even the grown people believed in fairies and told wonderful tales of what the little beings could do. Gradually, as people became better educated, they grew to know that there really were no fairies, but still they made stories about them for their children, for they had found out that there were few things in the world that children liked better to hear about. Some of the stories in this book, such as Cinderella, were written far back in the days when all people still believed in fairies. Today, there are in most countries many of the uneducated peasant classes who still have a strong belief in the little people and who see signs of their activity all about. When people of different nations think about fairies, they have somewhat different pictures before their eyes. Thus, in Russia, where it is so cold so much of the time, fairies are supposed to be dressed always in furs, beautiful white furs which only an emperor could afford. The Chinese fairy has a queue, and the fairies of India, where the learned Brahmins are the class most looked up to, are thought of as little old men, wise beyond words, but not bright and friendly like the fairies we hear most about. Of course, these fairies that we have heard most about are the English fairies, and very beautiful and charming creatures these are. Usually they look like very small and particularly graceful human beings, with gorgeous clothing and shimmering wings, though, of course, being fairies, they may change their forms and look like anything they choose. These little creatures live in a place called Fairyland, where all things are done by magic, but they do not always stay there. In fine weather, especially the nights of summer, the fairies prefer the earth to their own country, and they gather in great numbers in some flowery field or wood and revel all night long. On moonlight nights, they need no lights in the fields, but within the woods it is always dark, and they are forced to use fireflies as lanterns. Sometimes in a grassy meadow or pasture there appears a very green, fresh circle with a ring bare of grass about it. And to this day people call such a spot a fairy ring, though they know now, as they did not know when the name was given, that the bare ring is not formed by the feet of the fairies dancing in circle. Some of the gorgeous kinds of mushrooms, too, are known as fairy tables. But the fairies are not supposed to spend all their time in dancing and playing. They take often a great part in the lives of human beings. Many of the fairies are good and are of much help to the people who please them, slipping into their houses by night and doing, in a few hours, work which without them could not be accomplished in days. But some fairies are mischievous and tricky, and even malicious, and delight in doing things to spite and to injure people. Sometimes they overturn or take for themselves food that has been saved. Sometimes they turn sour the cream that the housewife intends to use for butter on the morrow. Sometimes they undo all the work that a seamstress or shoemaker has done during the day. If a man can only find out what these mischievous little people like best, he can buy their goodwill by placing such things where the fairies can readily find them. Besides the true fairies, there are supposed to be many other kinds of sprites, who are sometimes invisible, but who can appear when they wish. The dwarves or gnomes usually dwell underground, where they guard the gold and the silver and precious stones hidden in the earth. The most malicious of the dwarfs, called trolls, live in the hills and often come out to steal children and even women. The nixies, who live in the water, try to induce men or children to go with them to their caves under the sea, and if they cannot do this, they are quite capable of carrying their victims off by force. The Irish people have some very interesting fairy beliefs. Thus, they think that the banshees are little old women who conceal themselves in houses, and by their mournful wailing give notice of any death that is to occur. The Pixies, another class of small beings in whom the Irish believe, are supposed to receive into themselves the souls of children who die before they have been baptized. Though we know now that there are no such beings as fairies and gnomes, yet we can see about us every day things which are to the full as wonderful as any which the old-time peoples believed the fairies could accomplish. Centuries ago, when a story writer wanted to have his hero go a very long distance in a very short time, he had to introduce a fairy. Today, he simply makes his hero take an express train. Then, a message could be transmitted through space instantly, only by means of a fairy messenger. Now, the telegraph and the telephone do the work quite as quickly and as easily. You see, the old-time people saw the things that ought to be, but did not see how they could be. But we today do not need fairies to make the world seem marvelous. The things that really exist about us are more wonderful than anything that a man's imagination could invent.
Go ahead and press the subscribe button and make sure to subscribe. Go ahead and boof.